This review will cover the case of the Zodiac Killer. He operated in the late 1960s and the early 1970s in the state of California, and this case is often referred to as the Ace of Cases. It's one of the most prominent unsolved series of homicides in the history of the United States. It all began on December 20th, 1968, when David Faraday, age 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, age 16, went out for a casual drive. And let me get some information about that case on the screen here. One moment, please.
The summer of love was about to turn into the winter of fear. It was around 7 o'clock on Friday, December 20th, when 17-year-old David Faraday picked up 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen for a first date.
She was only 16, I think, and it was the first time that she was allowed to date. Apparently, what they told their parents was that they were going to go to a Christmas play or something at their high school. But they ended up going out to a place on the outskirts of Vallejo. It's just kind of a place that people go to be alone, kind of a lover's lane.
Few passers-by could see the couple parked in the secluded area.
It was 22 degrees or so, and very cold, and there's no lights anywhere out there. Even today, it's just pitch black.
David and Betty Lou were sitting in the car talking when a man approached, wielding a gun.
Tragically, they both were shot dead, and despite an extensive police investigation, it was never determined why they were killed or who the perpetrator was. And the following year, on July 4th, 1969, Darlene Farron, age 22, and Mike Mageau, age 19, also went for a casual drive. And unfortunately, they also were the victim of a shooting. And let me get some information about that case on the screen here. One moment, please.
ID'd as 22-year-old Darlene Farron and 19-year-old Mike Mageau, two locals from Vallejo. Darlene dies in the ambulance on her way to the hospital. Mageau, however, survives and tells Ed Rust this story. He claims Darlene picked him up at his house around 11:30. She needed to talk, so they went out to the Springs.
He said they'd just been there just a very few minutes, turned the headlights off. She had the radio playing, and a car pulled up behind them, and the person got out and was carrying a flashlight, and he said something to her, "Oh, it's a cop," or something like that.
The flashlight plays over the couple, and then Mageau hears the muffled report of shots being fired.
He says that this person just kept shooting. He's trying to get away, and he pulled over clear into the back seat. And then he heard more shots, and saw that Darlene was being shot.
Mike Mageau did survive that shooting and was able to offer a first-hand account exactly what happened at the scene. As you can see, the perpetrator shot several times, walked away, and then returned and shot both of them several times again. And Mike Mageau described him as a short, stocky person who had who just looked like a regular person. There's nothing that really stood out about him that was unusual. And they come up with a sketch, but it was somewhat of a generic sketch or general sketch. And upon completion of this shooting, the perpetrator went to a payphone and actually phoned the police station and took credit for the shooting and told them where it was located and everything. And the next attack by this individual took place on September 27th, 1969, at Lake Berryessa, where two youths were out, college-age youths were out enjoying a picnic. And let me get some information about that on the screen here. One moment, please.
Twilight In California's Napa Valley, the sun is low, casting long shadows across Lake Berryessa. On shore, a picnic is laid out. Nearby, the picnickers struggle to stay alive. Each has been bound hand and foot and stabbed repeatedly. Out on the lake, a fisherman hears the couple's cries and summons police.
And I believe we just finished dinner, and I got a call from the office indicating a couple of kids at Lake Marias had been stabbed.
At this location, the perpetrator stabbed the individuals, and one ended up deceased and one survived. And let me get a little more information on that on the screen. One moment, please.
Palm print. Back at the hospital, the victims are identified. The woman, 22-year-old Cecilia Shepard, never regains consciousness and dies from 10 stab wounds to the back and chest. Her companion, 20-year-old Brian Hartnell, survives and tells Detective Narlow his story.
I kept trying to talk to him.
He said that Cecilia was kind of startled, and Brian said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Well, there's a man standing over there, and he's staring at us." And then a little while later, she heard another noise, and that's when she saw the suspect come up from behind a tree. She looked up and she says, "Oh my God, there he is again. He's wearing a mask."
The man who
The perpetrator there is seen in a drawing. As you see, he has a mask on with a Zodiac symbol, and he has a gun as well as a knife. And after attacking them, he walked up to their car and left a message on the door. And he also phoned the police station and took credit for the stabbing and told them where it took place and everything. And at that junction, he had corresponded with the media as well as the police, and they now could identify him as the Zodiac killer. And the next attack by him took place in the city of San Francisco on October 13th, 1969, in the Presidio Heights neighborhood, where he hailed a taxi. And let me get some information about that on the screen here. One moment, please.
Zodiac turns up in the big city. Downtown San Francisco, a little before 10 p.m. Cabby Paul Stein picks up a fare in front of the St. Francis Hotel and takes a 10-minute drive to the big money neighborhood of Presidio. The fare directs Stein to stop at the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, puts a 9mm pistol to the cabbie's head, and pulls the trigger. Across the street and up a flight of stairs, a teenage girl happens to look out the window. She sees a man get out of the cab and begin to wipe down the outside of the car. After a bit,
After the shooting, the Zodiac killer left the scene and walked down the street a bit, and the police were notified of the shooting quite quick, and they arrived, and they may actually conversed with him. The person they conversed with, they asked if he had seen anything, and he said somebody had been running that way with a gun, and the police went in that direction, and the person they talked to disappeared into the city, and they could never determine if that was the Zodiac killer, but he did largely fit the description. And he took numerous variables from the taxi, and he sent them to a newspaper, and took credit for this particular shooting as well. And then from that point on, the investigation as to who he was continued. They developed some suspects. None of them were ever arrested, and the case just lingered on indefinitely. And here's a little more information about that. One moment, please.
Email messages regarding this case. And so it was decided that the case would be reactivated and assigned to an active homicide team.
Carroll pulls the case files and quickly realizes his best hope for success lies with forensics.
The idea that a criminal would be aware of fingerprints and things like that and take efforts to hide or conceal or mask them is reasonable. But the idea that they would be aware of DNA and try to hide that is not reasonable.
Carroll believes the Zodiac most likely took no precautions against DNA transfer.
And as you can see, the investigation lingered on for quite a number of years, and they're trying to use modern technology to backdate everything and see if they could find out who he is. Now, if they have his DNA, they could perhaps load it up to a genealogical website and find distant relatives, and that's worked in other cases. Whether it work in this case remains unclear, and the investigation is still going on. And there are a lot of citizen sleuths that have tried to solve the case. Let me get some information about them on the screen here. One moment, please.
Fred Keller, the Zodiac.
Here's what I think. I think he had some liquid courage, and that's where that time went. And then when he got brave, and he made a phone call.
Yeah.
The group is headed up by this man, Tom Voight. Although there are dozens of websites devoted to Zodiac, Voight's, called ZodiacKiller.com, is the big dog on the block.
At the very beginning, I would advertise in these little message boards and news groups around the internet. I would say, here's a new Zodiac site, and then word of mouth spread. And now I get, let's see, in May of 2003, I had 997,000 hits, and it's consistently.
And that's some information about a prominent website about the case, as well as some of the citizen sleuths that are trying to solve it. And I guess that should do it, provided everything uploaded okay. I tried to keep everything quick here so you can get a review. And there are other homicides as well as other cases they think the Zodiac may be involved with, but they just can't prove it. Those are largely based on speculation. But if you've heard about this case before, hopefully it's a quick and good flashback. If not, hopefully it's an informative review. And if everything uploaded, I'll take a look at it, and hopefully this will work out. One moment, please.